So my name is Maulik. I'm a cardiologist at Mass General. And about 5 years ago, we launched a new innovation lab, first of its kind at MGH, with the purpose of thinking about how do we leverage the emerging technologies to improve care delivery. And I'm the associate director of the lab. The founder and director of the lab is a cardiologist as well, Eric Isselbacher. And obviously, if you follow the healthcare industry in the U.S., you know over the last 7 to 10 years, there have been incredible pressures, intense pressures, because of payment reform and policies to actually achieve the triple aim of healthcare, which is to improve the health of populations at a lower cost, but with higher quality. It's impossible to sort of do all three at the same time in a really effective way. So we thought maybe they have this new approach to doing it. So we launched this lab, and let's see if I can advance slides. Do I have to point to, what do I point to?
To the laptop. Yeah.
Where is the laptop?
Right.
Okay, do you want me to do it?
No, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So very generically, the mission statement of the lab was to improve the experience and value of healthcare through collaborative innovation. And then we added this little tagline more recently by leveraging emerging technologies. And that was to just give ourselves a little bit different angle than the traditional many sort of innovation groups or centers that already exist at the hospital. One of the very popular sayings at Mass General, from the CEO down, has been, let 1,000 flowers bloom. And that's been really true of the history of Mass General. If you think about all the discoveries in terms of basic science and molecules and therapeutics, it's always been very successful. And we thought maybe there's a little different angle here in terms of digital health technology. We need a little more centralization and coordination of innovation activities and approach it a little bit differently. So we started, next slide, actually a page out of the book here. This is Clay Christensen's book, Innovator's Dilemma. I was reading it at the time I joined the lab and found this really nice framework of how you think about different types of innovation. And at least the way he described it, there's 4 types of innovation. The process, and you guys probably all know this: process improvement, process revolution, which actually we just talked a lot about, product innovation, and then strategic innovation. And we thought it was really nice for us to, at the outset, define what our swim lanes were, where we want to operate, so not to be threatening to all the other groups already at the hospital that were doing this. So we sort of said, there was already a process improvement team that was hired 4 years before we started to what's called Design Partners Healthcare. Like, that's a whole redesign team already existing. So we thought process and product innovation was a nice way to play where really nobody was doing that work. And obviously at the strategic level, the Partners Healthcare system of Mass General Hospital did a lot of that work, so we sort of wanted to do that. So that was how we framed it. And there's one last slide on the lab, and I'll go into the stuff we did. The next slide really talks about sort of the 3 key pillars of the lab, which is, first and foremost, was the idea that we'll talk about culture. How do you change the culture of innovation at a place like MGH? So we had this pillar on collaborative innovation, which is all around engaging the staff and the community, both internally and then partnering externally with the innovation ecosystem of Boston and Cambridge. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The middle vertical is all around how do we actually leverage, identify, evaluate, and validate technologies to actually deploy them in the hospital. So how do we improve care at MGH operationally? And then the last was, as a research hospital, of course, we care a lot about studying things and evaluating rigorously. So I lead the vertical on clinical trials. How do we actually evaluate novel technologies, both in terms of safety and effectiveness, but also more importantly, in the new world, sort of economic analysis on ROI, financial ROI. So those are sort of ended up being the 3 key pillars of the laboratory. So when we launched this lab, we were thinking about what our original projects would be, and I had some experience, which I guess at the time I didn't know. That was part of an experiment at Harvard Medical School. So I was a postdoc in a basic science laboratory in 2013, and I was invited to attend this program by Harvard Catalyst, where it ended up being Kareem was running it with Ava, I think, at the Harvard Medical School, Harvard Catalyst. And it was to bring a lot of scientists together. And if I remember correctly, it was a program to have them mingle and talk to each other to come up with new ideas and cross-disciplinary ideas. Apparently, it was a crowdsourced experiment on what were the quality of the ideas and the productivity of those scientists if they did that in that program over time. So I learned about the experiment, and I also was part of, at MIT, just at the time, 2012-13, there was a new student group formed called Hacking Medicine. I was taking part in a lot of these healthcare hackathons on weekends. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we did something like that in a healthcare environment? It's never been done before. I was not aware of any such experiment. So we ended up, I proposed this idea of open innovation contest. And the very first time we proposed this, there were 0 people in the audience that ever heard of the term open innovation or crowdsourcing. They just never heard of that term before, right? I hadn't heard of that term before, so I met Kareem. So it took a while, almost close to 6 months to a year, to convince leadership to actually be able to do this experiment where we would actually engage the entire staff of what we decided to start with was a heart center. So the heart center is a combination of cardiology, cardiac surgery, and vascular surgery. So it was like 3 different departments all together in the center, about 1,200 staff members. So we launched this experiment about how do we actually crowdsource pain points from the entire staff of the heart center at MGH. And that ended up being the first launch of this concept. We ended up calling it the Ether Dome Challenge. And Ether Dome Challenge just because ether was sort of discovered at Mass General in the 1800s and transformed surgical anesthesia. Ever since then, so I thought it was sort of interesting to think about legacy of innovation and bringing it to forward age. So that's how it started, and we've been doing it for 4 years now as an annual contest. And it's been really interesting, and I'll talk to some of the results of that and how we set it up. But right when we're about to launch it, the other idea I had was that, as a scientist, was like, if we're going to do this, we want to study it. Because knowing the audience, I was like, they would love to see data on what's the actual impact of this experiment and how we conducted it. So I actually reached out to Kareem, and I was like, hey, we have this new innovation lab, and I'm trying to do this open innovation contest. Would you help us? Just think about how do we actually run it. And of course, as great as he is, he said, well, not only we can help you run it, we have some ideas around how you can structure it so you can actually learn something. And obviously, they were very interested in understanding what a learning organization looks like and what are some of the motivations of why people participate. So his students, Mike, Andreas, Olivia is here. A lot of them actually helped us launch the first experiment because we didn't have the infrastructure or resources to run a contest. So we actually used HBS's Qualtrics platform the very first year to do this, which was fantastic. So if you go into it, so this is, like I said, it's called the Ether Dome Challenge. And I think our goal, when we launched it the very first year, was more around, I quite frankly didn't think we're gonna identify like the blockbuster magic idea that's gonna solve healthcare, right? The goal for us was really to engage the staff, has a positive morale, had this experiment that people felt that they were being heard at all levels, not just senior faculty members who are classically used to these committees and meetings, but all the way down to the administrators, the OR techs, all the staff members. Well, the second thing I think was of interest was to identify the innovators who were passionate, interested in submitting ideas and engaging the process to say that if we went on to execute on those ideas, who would we tap to help us do this? So those are the 2 goals, at least what we had early on when we started. And the third, of course, is ideas over titles. And that's critical because we'll talk a little bit how we structured it, specifically to get at that issue of ideas over titles. And then we did want to obviously award some grants to actually do this. So we did have some philanthropic funding. We awarded between 3 to 5 grants each year. And we actually then helped project manage the grants for the entire 12-month cycle to see them through. So that was sort of the framework. If you go to the next slide. This is just talking about the logistics of how the experiment, the challenge was set up. The contest was set up. So we made this little storyboard animation video to sort of just make something fun about how to announce the challenge. But the 4 key parts of the challenge, and I think this is important for our organization, and I'm sure for your organization as well, will be we actually broke it down, the application, into 2 phases. And the first phase was a very simple, even a sentence or 2 statement on your pain point. and not like the full application that we're typically used to as scientists or academics, who was like an NIH grant. And the idea there was to lower the barrier, the activation energy for any staff member to even on a piece of paper just write something and contribute, as opposed to make it so challenging that they're like, that's sort of not for me, this is for the docs or the residents. So that was sort of one key thing. We made this ideation phase really simple and short, and then we had a crowd voting phase where we had just literally thumbs up, thumbs down. I think we did star ratings the first year. And we had a couple of key questions around the novelty, the feasibility, and the potential impact of the proposed pain point / solution. And then we said and then we filtered that down and said, okay, now that we have these X number of ideas or pain points, let's now invite a subset of those to actually submit the full application that has a little more thought and details on the proposed solution, as well as the budget and the team that would execute against it. And that allowed us to then actually go a lot deeper into the commitment and the dedication of this team to actually go solve the problem, and also understand what the budgets, how realistic is it to actually solve the problem with the limited resources that we're providing them, right? And then we award them. So that's sort of the framework we took for all the years. And it's been the same model for the last 4 years. So over the 4 years, and we just finished our last one a couple of weeks ago. And these are all in different areas of health. All right, so we started the Heart Center, and then we went on to Cancer Center, and the most recent one was actually a Department of Surgery. The Heart Center was done twice, so that's why it's 4 contests. We had over 532 submissions, which was so on average about 125 per year, which is way more than I ever expected, just given how just busy and sort of into their work everybody is on a daily basis. But more surprising was the votes. We had over 6,000 votes on those 500 submissions. In the very first year, I'll show the data, over 150 people voted on every single one of those 150 ideas, which was shocking because we had separated out our voting into like 10 ideas per page. And we thought people would do the first 2 pages, and I don't have time. And people went to the whole 14 pages. So I think people are really engaging with other people's ideas and just learning about what people are right now, which was really engaging. And then we awarded grants, and we can talk about those as well. And then after we did the first year using the HBSS platform, we realized this is really interesting. There's a lot of sort of engagement. The senior leadership sort of appreciated some of the findings. And we thought we wanted to do this on an annual basis. So we actually invested in building our own platform internally, which is shown in this little mock-up here, that we now can run not only can run concurrent contests now. So this platform allows us to run 3 to 4 to 10 contests at the same time, so there's 1 contest per year. And we have built in a bunch of analytics on the back end, so we can actually then segregate things by role groups, like doctors versus nurses versus administrators, or by type of idea: patient-facing, provider-facing, health system-facing, patient experience versus workflow, all these sort of different analytics. So that's sort of the framework. If you go to the next slide, this is just use for the slide. Go to the next slide. We'll talk to a couple of examples of 2 different economic challenges, year 1 and year 3. But any questions at all so far? I'll mention one thing is, and this is important, I think Kareem, you may have talked about this when you first started, is in order to get buy-in, not only to do the contest, but to actually be successful in executing on the awarded grants, we actually picked both clinical and administrative champions before we launched. So we identified the VPs of each of the individual sort of subdivisions within the Heart Center to say, we would want your support in the grants that the application was selected requested to apply for the full grant, as well as the ones we awarded. So there's no sort of barriers after they get awarded to then say, we actually can't do this, it's competing with something else we're doing. And that would be the worst case scenario, is to ask people for advice on ideas and pain points and then be like, sorry, we can't do that. So that thing was extremely helpful. Yes, David.
Yeah, so if I can ask a question, it's specific to you, but also to, I'm interested actually probably to all the academics and the platforms in here, is you keep using the term, you repeated just now how surprised you were by how much of a response you got. I'm curious I'm curious, first the question for you is to talk a little more, if you don't mind, about why you didn't think people would participate. And then more broadly to academics and platform providers, who've been doing this for some time now, what are the standards? What's the benchmark? What's the expectation when you put out a contest? What is your expectation of participation? And then obviously there are levers for improving that, but I'm curious about it. But
That's a great question. I guess one way to say is we had low expectations. But I think the reason was the way we disseminate the content, right? So first and foremost, the one thing we did, again, as part of the collaboration discussions training, was to think about, we sent the first email out from the director of the entire Heart Center. So it didn't come from our innovation lab. It didn't come from me individually. We said the chief of the director of the Heart Center is going to send this email out. So at least we have visibility. But having said that, we get, as most of you know, large companies, lots and lots and lots of emails every day. And not all staff members actually check their email every day. In fact, not as much as have emails that they check at work, right? Because they're OR tech and the OR all day. So we just didn't know what's the propagation of this message we're going to send to people, and how often would they check them, but would they actually get it of the hundreds of emails they get every day? And they're like, what is this new open innovation contest? Never heard the term before. They don't know what it's about. So I think that's the main reason. Because of that, we did do this entire sort of thing where we went in break rooms and breakfast and lunch series, and we walked around the entire hospital because of virtual heart center, different areas of the hospital, to actually do sessions because we wanted to get more engagement. This showed that every time we had one of these sessions, there'd be a big uptick in submissions within the next 6 to 12 hours of that session. They're doing a lot more of those, and they're getting over hundreds of ideas over the course of it. But early on the first week, I think we're very 10, 20 ideas only. Yeah, that's why. And I don't know if you think of other platforms, is that
So let me, on the internal crowdsourcing platforms, let me sort of show you what the puzzle is from an economic perspective, right? So here's Maulik at the Heart Center, one of the top hospitals in the US. Right? These people are busy, focused on their jobs, they're gonna save patient lives, provide care. They don't have time for fun and games, right? They're serious people. Secondly, their jobs are narrow and focused. And when you ask a question like this, saying, suggest improvements for healthcare in our system, right? You're basically asking people to contribute to public good where they or they may not benefit from it, right? So this becomes an internal public goods request, right? Where you're going to exert effort and the benefit may or may not come to you. So we would expect under-provisioning of those goods, right? You should expect that, right? Like why would, your job is to do X, I'm getting paid to do X, right? If I do this thing, maybe my manager will get mad at me. Like, why are you helping somebody else out in your organization, right? Most organizations face that all the time, right? Like, your job is to work on this unit. Why are you helping unit Y out now with this thing? So there's many reasons why we'd expect under-provisioning of these types of goods. And then the work we did with Olivia and so forth was to actually design an experiment to see, in fact, what are the different types of incentives we can offer that would overcome this problem. And we found, iPads go a long way.
Yeah, that's a punchline right there.
Irrespective of you're a cardiac surgeon earning millions of dollars versus your lab tech earning thousands of dollars.
So we had 4. So the thing they did in the back end, we got people's email addresses and basic demographics, and we randomized the message that went with the email of why they should participate in this open innovation contest. And it was around winning an iPad, winning $25,000, presenting to the CEO of the hospital, or just improving the workplace or the patient care. That's just personal motivation.
So I do think there is I think people want to participate, but often they find that the suggestion box model sucks and there's no credibility, right? Because it all goes in the round file anyway, right? And so we had to build credible commitment from it. That was our big thing. We're not going to participate, Olivia and I and our team, unless there was credible commitment from the MGH staff that they're going to follow through on the ideas. So we're very busy. We don't want to do another experiment just to show this thing works. We know it works, but then you need commitment from your staff, from your senior staff, to actually say we're going to implement. Once we had that, then we said we can then run the experiment. And so I think the credible commitment also boosted the submission rates too.
Yeah.
Sure. So we benchmark. We've done this for 3 years with our client base, and this is pretty much what we do. So the newest one, the 2018 130 or 40 large global companies, 42% active participation in year one of those that are invited in to participate. What drives the participation is exactly what you said, the marketing. And so when we launch these, we have a full marketing playbook and how it's going to be marketed and posters and emails and you get the rally going. And over time, on year three, participation actually grows versus wean to, I think in the survey, I gave it Z1, I forget the exact number, I think it's 62% by year three of active participation. Active participation is measured by, I might be contributing an idea or a thought or something new. I might be commenting or iterating on somebody else's. I might be doing some pairwise head-to-head voting. I might be doing some other thing that you're asking me to participate that's going to help advance the cause to get to some new intelligence, some winning idea, something that'll move the needle. So 42 to 62% is the benchmark, and that's been true for the last 3 years of the surveys we've been doing.
Awesome. So let me just share, I know we have only 5 minutes, so we'll take some more questions. Just share this 1 year's data, get a sense of what kind of things we get. Next slide. So this is the first year we did it. This is the year we had the experimentation built in, the social randomization. We had about 140 or so ideas from 70 different individuals. So clearly there were people who are submitting multiple ideas, which is great. Like I said, it was voted on by over 300 employees, but every idea got over 100 votes, which is fantastic. So actually had a lot of sort of precision in terms of the rating scale. The next slide. So this talks a little bit about the type of ideas that were submitted, and we had these categories sort of built in ahead of time. If you look at care coordination, patient support, physician workflow. I mean, for those that work in the hospital setting, it's not that surprising, but the sort of common challenges. And I remember Mass General had just gone on to the new electronic medical record system right in the middle of this thing. So right, the uptick on the physician workflows like totally shot up. The sort of the weak ethic wasn't solved. So this is sort of interesting timing on those. If you go to the next slide and go to year 3, one more. This also shows you a little bit about the role groups. And it's pretty typical, obviously just the way the thing is structured. There are physicians, nurses, and nurse practitioners in the majority of the votes. It's interesting to see how many diverse role groups are for the first time ever participate in something like this. I mean, if you think about the history of healthcare, this might sort of never happened before where somebody would say, oh, you actually are interested in what I have to say about the patient transport system and why that sucks. Radiology is a 2-hour wait every single day. And the latest year, nurses had a ton more idea submissions than physicians in the individual groups. So they're very active participants. I'll pause there. I can go into obviously, the awarding of the grants, and then we obviously execute against that over the 6 to 12-month cycle. We have regular touch bases in the product management team. And some of those have gone on to actually be incredibly successful projects that have not implemented through center-wide. But it's hard. It's extremely difficult, even despite all these things that actually, because the amount of money you have to build solutions is still pretty limited. To have scalable solutions requires a second round of investment, usually from leadership. And I think for some of these ideas, there's sort of the ROI is there that they recognize it for the first time and say, oh, okay, this is worth investing in. But most importantly, the people that we identified have actually 3 out of the last 4 years have actually gone on to multiple rounds of promotions, to identify almost a new career track in their local fields. So that's actually another very interesting way to sort of think about how this other impacts that concepts like this can have besides just pure identifying the acquisition methods. Questions at all? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Can you say more about this career track change? Give some examples.
Yeah. So there's a great example. There's a female lady in the cath lab named Meg McClary, and she submitted the idea that physicians, when they perform an angiogram, sort of just randomly choose catheters. And they just have this shelf of catheters outside the cath lab. They just go and pick one that they want. They sort of try, it doesn't work. They just get the new one. And there's no science thing. And they sort of have an instinct about which catheters are the right type of the right anatomy. And there was no sort of understanding of the cost of the catheters. So she had this project called Cost to Cath. And all she said, well, we can't put prices on things. She just had this labeling method of just red, yellow, green. And just the top of each vertical and nothing else. And in 3 months that we implemented this, just knowing that these catheters are differential pricing, think that was like almost a $250,000 cost savings. People just choosing the right, it really didn't matter which catheter to use. If you look at other institutions like Cleveland Clinic, they actually have now used that data to say that they only will negotiate with 1 or 2 vendors to buy all their catheters and incredibly impressive pricing. In fact, they published this and it says that $7 million across Cleveland Clinic because of negotiations on just having a consensus to say these catheters work across all conditions. If we just did that, we would save money, right? So I think that was a really simple or brilliant idea. And now she sort of ended up getting an MBA, and people recognize that she has interest in this space, but also some talent. We sent her for some courses through our lab because she's like really engaging and interested in the space. So that's a good example. And there's some other physicians who've done this as well. They've sort of gone on to have part of their protected time do more innovation activities or operational work, as opposed to pure research. I think that's sort of the example we can give. They've been very productive. Yes?
Quick question. Can you speak to the size of your team at the beginning of the program versus today?
Our team is the same as it started, for better or for worse. So we're about 6 people, maybe a little more. There are a couple of physicians, so me, the director. There's a managing director who's an MBA. And then we have a lot of project coordinators and 1 program manager. A lot of the hand-holding for these projects is our project coordinators are assigned to each project. And we sort of really hand-hold them through the entire project because these physicians they're just so busy that they will not deliver on the milestones and timelines. We have to sort of have regular meetings and we're able to do that. So it's a small team. It's not that big a team. We're funded philanthropically. Now we have a little more operational funding from the hospital that she's showing value, but it's a small team. The industry grants for research are separate. So those are sometimes larger. Yes?
I'm sorry, this is probably the stupidest question of all, but you kept saying at the end there's a grant. Is the grant the money that is then used to implement the solution?
Yeah.
It's not the money paid to the person.
No, not at all.
The
Right,
money
exactly. That's right.
To implement.
Implement person. Yeah, the grant at the end of the innovation contest is an award that the winner gets to implement the solution. Some of the solutions don't require money; they just require buy-in. So we had 3 projects that required literally less than $2,000 just to do it.
Yeah.
But having the administrative champion, the clinical champion from the leadership say they're behind this, got that done in a very rapid, sort of short time frame, whereas it would almost never happen from IT support, approval, and all these other things if it wasn't part of this.
Only takes
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So it's almost fast tracks innovations that are relatively low-hanging fruits.
Yeah.
Okay, are we done on time?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, yeah, George, one last question?
Yeah, one more.
Okay.
One last quick question. Yeah, just pick up on that last point. Like,
Yeah.
I'm super curious. It's very motivated people within the hospital who have these ideas already.
Mhm.
So, what's your insight into the mechanism here that fast track these low hanging fruit? Why didn't they do it themselves? Like,
It's a great question.
without this?
I think traditional individuals in hospitals have great ideas and voice them are the faculty members who then apply for traditional grant funding to go sort of that pathway with the medical devices and things. I think ideas around just pure sort of improvement of the work of operational efficiencies or just patient experience don't get as much visibility just because of like the strategic priority. You just have so many priorities at the top level on like meaningful use or readmission penalties or value-based purchasing, value-based care. All these sort of things, I think you just unfortunately don't have the bandwidth always for some of these ideas. And some folks don't have really a podium to actually convey those ideas, right? So if you think about a nurse on the floor with a 12-hour shift and they have a night shift, like when are they ever going to have that opportunity to voice those ideas? And if you think about a classic, there's a whole big maker-nurse movement in the US now out of MIT. And nurses have the solutions all the time that nobody knows about, like IV poles and wheelchairs. And you see these things, but nobody ever talks about them and nobody formalizes those things. That's an incredible opportunity, I think, to learn if you had this. I think that's my main reason this works. Awesome. Well, thank you for listening. Thanks for the opportunity to come.